So news came out recently from Ian Rappaport that Joe Mixon is due to miss an extended period of time with the foot injury, the foot low ankle, low leg, ankle, whatever it is that he has this time that's had him in a walking boot for all of OTAs, all of mini camps, and now starting into training camp. We're going to talk today about his fantasy value, his outlook for 2025, and whether or not you should be taking him or avoiding him at his current ADP. Again, Joe Mixon, running back, Houston Texans. Of course, if you want exact advice for what to do in every single pick of your draft, make sure to go to RosterWatch.com, get the ultimate draft cheat sheet. It's magical, it's mystical, it is mythical. It will tell you what to do at every turn if you follow the 3 simple rules at the top of the sheet of paper. It's updated daily for PPR leagues, for half point and standard leagues, for super flex leagues, whatever it is that you got. It's going to help you dominate your fantasy football draft. It's had over 1 million downloads for a reason. So thank you for checking that out. RosterWatch.com, get a pro membership. All right, so Mixon, here's the issue. So it's like before we even talk about the injury, and look, he does have a injury history to him. He had the midfoot, the dreaded midfoot stuff back in 2020. And then 2022, 2023 had ankle stuff. 2024, it was a couple of different injuries. It was really just one reported high ankle sprain, but there's been reports that there was 2 separate injuries this season, and then possibly something that happened in the offseason for them to have to come work on it, do a little bit of cleanup stuff, all the rest of that. And it's always been, oh, he's going to be fine by the time he gets around for fall camp. He's going to be fine. And then all of a sudden we get here and it's like, no, he's not fine. He's going to miss an extended period. He's probably going to miss a couple games, and that can linger into more because we're talking about a guy who's 28 years old. He is reaching the total age cliff as far as running backs outside of true outliers like Derrick Henry, all the rest of them, especially for these bigger dudes. And now Mixon can do some stuff receiving out of the backfield. And you're going to look at me and you're going to say, well, look, the Texans last year were a terrible offense. They got their offensive coordinator fired. They took a huge step backward from what we got from CJ Stroud as a rookie. And he still was running back 10 in PPR. But what I would say is that, man, if you just look into it, Joe Mixon last year had 12 touchdowns between rushing and receiving. That was he was 30% dependent in PPR on touchdowns out of the top 50 running backs in fantasy last year and on a points per game basis. That basically puts him in basically tied for 9th as far as the most touchdown dependent of all. So, dependent on undependable touchdowns is something to worry about. And then just some of the underlying statistics, right? You look at over at the fantasy points data suite, you can look at stuff rate. That's the just the rate with which these guys are stuffed. And it's always been such a telling stat for me because you can look at the stuff rates. You could be like, yep, that checks. That definitely checks out. That guy looks like that guy was a guy who was getting stuffed over and over again last season, a guy that looked like he was not producing in the way that you would like him to. And then you see where it's these guys that are above 50% stuff rates. And you're just like, yeah, those are the dust balls. Those are the ones. You get Joe Mixon, you got Gus Edwards, you got, the 2024, corpse of Zeke Elliott. You got J.K. Dobbins and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Dameon Pierce, guys like Deontay Foreman, Zamir White. It's like you could probably name the high stuff rate guys by just kind of closing your eyes and thinking about who are the guys who get behind the line of scrimmage, who run into the backs of their offensive tackles and look like their pants are filled with oatmeal, and then fall over. That's what that stuff rate sort of tells you, right? And I think you wonder too with Mixon, was it just having to do with maybe he's just not good versus zone or not good running behind a zone blocking offensive line? And we know that, that was one of the things with Bobby Slowick. He was always trying to, round peg, square hole this thing with continuing to just kind of stay with the zone run game. Now, the new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley, he has experience with both the man gap schemes and zone run schemes. He had the man gap stuff during his time with the Patriots, and then also the wide zone stuff with the Shanahan scheme. The problem is with Mixon. So yeah, he did have the lowest success rate in zone last year of any running back with over 100 zone rushing attempts outside of DeAndre Swift. He was the worst. But so you think that a move to more of like a man gap kind of blocking scheme would be helpful for him. But the only running back with at least 100 man gap attempts last year who had a worse success rate in man gap scheme runs was J.K. Dobbins. So he was kind of bad with that stuff. He's been falling off. He was perched up by touchdowns and pure opportunity and pure volume last season when he was healthy. We already gotten concerns about him, about his health, basically throughout his career. The Texans not only brought in, so the Texans themselves were sniffing around J.K. Dobbins for a long time there. He goes to Denver, but then they get Nick Chubb, and then they also drafted Woody Marks. And you have to remember, if you're going to be depending on Mixon to continue to once he's even back, if you're going to be depending on him to be able to buttress his fantasy scoring through the receiving game, just remember Woody Marks is a talented guy. He actually, in this draft last year, of all the guys at the Combine or that were invited to the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, all the rest of it, he was the fourth highest running back as far as team reception percentage in the whole draft last season. So he's a receiving back. He's good at it. He can bite into that receiving work, and that could hurt Mixon, especially if Marks gets a runway to actually like have a platoon to start the year with a guy like Nick Chubb. Look, the final thing I'll say is that, and it might be what I should have opened with, is that the offensive line was one of the worst in the league last year, and they're going to have to prove it to us that they've gotten better and actually not worse. Whenever you had a terrible offensive line last year and you trade away a Laramie Tunsil, you trade away an early round pick like a Kenyon Green, and you go ahead and you bring in guys who look like they drafted Ariante Ursary, who I think has a ton of upside, but everybody who knows ball would tell you it's like, well, that guy's like a mold of clay. He could be good at some point, but he's probably going to need some time to be able to develop and to be able to contribute in a positive way at the NFL level. It just feels like they're going to be growing pains. And if you listen to the reports out of Texans camp, that they don't even have their starting offensive line set really to start camp. They're still working it's like a different five guys every single time. They have like four different groups that they're working through trying to see the best five. And so you understand that with a bunch of new personnel, with a new offensive coordinator in tow, with possibly moving some blocking schemes around, you can understand it, right? But it doesn't make you feel any more comfortable taking Mixon in your fantasy football drafts, especially when you're having to take him in the fourth round. That you're taking somebody that if you can't start him in week 1, that's going to be your RB2 that you can't even play. If you can't be taking guys in round 4 that you're not going to be using in the first week of your fantasy football season. It's just it's a crazy thing to consider. And then just consider there are going to be guys who are going after him like James Conner, and you might think that he's old, but he's the workhorse in Arizona. Nobody's worried about what's going to happen with James Conner. Could he get hurt? Of course, any of these guys could get hurt. But here's the thing: Joe Mixon's already hurt. R.J. Harvey is going way after him. David Montgomery is going way after him. Travion Henderson, who's looking good in Patriots camp, is going way after him. You should be taking Joe Mixon well after all these guys and well after some of the wide receivers going around those guys. Ted McMillan, Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, Calvin Ridley. All those guys need to be off the board before you can even consider ever clicking Joe Mixon's name for 2025 fantasy football leagues.
This is Anthony Richardson, and you're listening to RosterWatch.
This is AJ Brown, and you're listening to RosterWatch.
This is Josh Allen, and you're listening to RosterWatch.